Chapter 1 Ash Beneath Twin Suns. The desert was not silent. It hissed. The wind carried voices across dunes older than memory, voices of sand and bone, of forgotten empires buried beneath heat and centuries. Tatooine burned under twin suns, their merciless glare stretching shadows like dying limbs across the wastelands. Here, life was a wound that never healed. Here, hope was a myth whispered by fools. In a small settlement of rust and dust, a boy worked, bare feet scorched against the sand, hands raw from metal edges. He was no more than 9, but his eyes were storms, blue, too bright for this world, like fragments of some lost sea. They belonged to skies beyond Tatooine, though the boy himself did not know it yet. His name was Anakin Skywalker, but the galaxy did not tremble at that name, not yet. The boy crouched beneath the hull of a podracer engine, sweat dripping from his brow as he tightened a frayed coupling. Around him, the junkyard stretched, like a graveyard of forgotten machines. Heat shimmered. The stench of oil mixed with the dry sting of sand. From inside the workshop, a voice barked in Huttese. "Boy, faster." Anakin flinched. Watto, his owner. His master. The word tasted bitter, though Anakin had learned to swallow it long ago. Slavery was the air he breathed, the chain no one could see but everyone felt. And yet, even as the Huttese curses flew like stones, the boy's mind wandered. Always wandered, beyond the walls, beyond the suns. He could almost hear it sometimes, a hum beneath the noise of the market, soft and strange, like music in the bones. A pull in the marrow of the world, the Force, though he did not know the name Anakin. A softer voice now, from the doorway. Shmi Skywalker, his mother. Her face was weary, lined by sun and sorrow, but her eyes held warmth that the desert could not burn away. "Come inside," she said, "before the storm comes." He hesitated, glancing at the padracer, half buried in shadow. His creation, his escape, if only for moments. Then he nodded, wiping grease across his tunic, and followed her in. The door slid shut, cutting off the blaze outside. Inside, the air was no cooler, but it smelled of bread and old cloth, of a home carved out of emptiness. "Sit," she told him. "Eat." He obeyed, though his mind was still elsewhere in the sky. In the roar of engines, in the dream that haunted him night after night, flying. Not in a padracer, not in any ship he had seen, but through stars themselves, with no chains, no walls. Free Shmi watched him with quiet pain. She had seen those dreams in his eyes since the day he could walk. She feared them as much as she loved them, for dreams were dangerous here. Dreams broke hearts. Outside, thunder rolled, not from clouds, but from machines. Padracers screamed across the horizon, leaving trails of smoke and dust. The Boonta Eve Classic was near, and the whole settlement throbbed with fever, gambling, violence, death. But to Anakin, it was life. It was the only sky he could claim. "Mum," he said suddenly, breaking the silence, "do you ever feel like there's something out there, waiting for us?" Her hand stilled over the bread. She looked at him, at the boy who was and was not hers, not entirely. "What do you mean, like something calling, like I'm supposed to be somewhere else?" She smiled, but her eyes were glass. "We all feel that, Arnie. What keeps us alive?" He shook his head. "No, it's more, like I can hear it. When I close my eyes, like a voice, but not words." Her heart clenched. She reached out, touched his cheek. "Don't listen too hard," she whispered. Some voices lead only to pain. But he already was, and the voice was not silent. It whispered in the heat, in the grain of every stone. It whispered of power, of freedom, of paths carved in fire. And though he could not know, others listened to far beyond this desert. In towers of white and in shadows of crimson, the storm came at dusk. Sand swept like knives across the settlement, devouring streets and shutters. The suns bled red as they sank, twin eyes closing on a world that had long ceased to matter. Anakin lay on his mat, staring at the ceiling, the wind howling like beasts outside. He did not sleep. He dreamed awake of engines, of stars, of something vast and endless that seemed to lean close, breath cold against his ear, and in that storm a whisper bloomed chosen. The word was not spoken. It was felt. It crawled through his blood like a secret. He sat up, heart pounding. The room was empty, shadows dancing like spirits. His mother slept in the next chamber, her breath slow and fragile. But Anakin could not move, could not breathe, chosen. He did not understand, but part of him, the deepest part, already knew in the wastes beyond Mos Espa, a figure walked alone beneath the twin suns, cloak whipping in the storm. A Jedi, drawn by a tremor that had shaken the Force to its roots. He could not see the boy yet, but the boy could feel him. Two lines of destiny, moving toward collision. Anakin lay back down slowly, eyes wide in the dark. The storm raged. The whisper lingered. And for the first time, the boy felt fear, not of Watto, not of chains, not of death, but of himself. Tomorrow, the suns would rise again, the desert would burn, the slaves would work. Nothing would change, and everything would. Chapter 2. The stranger in the dust, the suns rose bleeding over the dunes, staining the sky in amber and fire. The storm of yesterday had passed, but the desert kept its scars, dunes carved into jagged ridges, moisture sucked from every breath. Tatooine was eternal in its cruelty. It birthed nothing but silence and bones. Yet today, something new stirred across the horizon. Not the wind, not the scream of Padrissa engines. Something quieter. A ripple, unseen yet felt like the first shiver before a quake splits the earth. In the heart of Mos Espa, no one noticed. Slaves scurried, merchants shouted, huts roared. From their palaces of filth, the world turned as it always did. No one noticed the stranger. He came cloaked robes, heavy with sand, who'd drawn low against the glare. He moved like a shadow disguised as a man, steps slow, deliberate, the hum of purpose wrapped around him like breath. His name was Qui-Gon Jinn, and the Force walked with him. He felt it thrumming beneath his boots. Deep in the marrow of this forsaken world, Tatooine was a graveyard, but even graveyards hold secrets. Qui-Gon could sense them, faint currents in the Force, old and restless. Whispers in the dunes, something hungry. It pulled at the edge of his senses like a thread tangled in shadow. But there was something else, brighter and stranger, piercing through the storm of dark murmurs like a blade of sunlight. A presence, small, distant, and impossibly strong. The boy Qui-Gon's jaw tightened as he wove through the market, eyes scanning faces. He did not know what he was seeking, not yet. Only that the living Force screamed at him like a warning bell. This was no accident. The mission, the blockade, the Queen's plea, all of it had led him here, to this furnace of sand and sin. To something. The The Force does not speak in words. But if it did, he thought, it would speak now. He paused at a vendor's stall, pretending to examine a tray of tarnished hyperdrives. In truth, he was listening to the flow beneath the noise, to the subtle tremor that had guided him since dawn. And then, faint as a breath, he heard it, laughter, a child's laughter. It rang clear even through the chaos of the bazaar, cutting through the Huttese curses and engine roars. Qui-Gon turned, and there darting between piles of scrap, sun, painting his hair gold, was the boy. His tunic was ragged, his feet bare, but he ran like the wind obeyed him. Every motion was grace-edged with wildness, untrained, undisciplined, and yet, attuned, the air seemed to bend around him. The sand parted where he leaped. Qui-Gon's breath caught. The Force was not whispering now, it was screaming. The boy skidded to a stop beside a Padressa frame propped against a rusted wall. His hands, small but sure, moved across the engine's spine with the tenderness of a healer and the precision of an artist. Qui-Gon watched, unseen, as the boy murmured to himself, words half-formed, language bending beneath the weight of ideas too large for his years. And then the boy froze. Slowly, his head turned, blue eyes impossibly bright, like shards of some lost ocean locked on Qui-Gon's. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The noise of the market faded. The suns dimmed. Only the wind spoke, and in its voice, the echo of something vast. Qui-Gon lowered his hood. The boy tilted his head, wary but curious, not afraid. Never afraid. "Hello," Qui-Gon said softly. The boy hesitated. "You're not from here." "No," Qui-Gon admitted. "Are you?" The boy smiled, faint and sharp, like sunlight on glass. "I was born here." Qui-Gon felt the truth ripple through the Force like a pebble dropped in deep water. Born here, and yet he did not belong. Not to this world, not to any world. "What's your name?" Qui-Gon asked. "Anakin," the boy said. Then, after a pause, as if the words mattered, "Anakin Skywalker." Qui-Gon tasted the name in his mind. Skywalker, like prophecy wearing flesh, like storm given voice. Before he could speak again, a harsh cry split the air. The boy flinched. A winged shape buzzed down from the shadows, a Toydarian wings beating like an angry drum. Watto, the master. The chain-given wings. Arnie Watto snarled in Huttese. Back to work, now. The boy's gaze lingered on Qui-Gon for a breath longer, blue fire in a world of dust. Then he turned and vanished into the maze of scrap, swallowed by heat and shadow. The market roared back to life. Qui-Gon stood alone, cloak heavy on his shoulders, heart pounding like war drums. The Force whispered, "He is the one," that night. The stars burned cold above Tatooine, scattered like bones across a black sky. Qui-Gon knelt in the darkened hold of the Queen's starship, hands resting on his knees, mind adrift in the currents of the Force. He reached for stillness, but there was none. Only storm-dot visions came, shards of what was, what would be, what must never be. A boy standing amid flames, eyes like twin suns, Jedi falling like broken statues, a temple drowning in blood, and behind it all, a shadow vast as night, a will coiled in silence, waiting. The prophecy whispered through his thoughts like a serpent. The chosen one shall bring balance, but balance to what, and at what cost? Qui-Gon opened his eyes. The desert. Wind howled beyond the walls, rattling metal like bones in a grave. He thought of the boy of laughter ringing like silver through the filth of eyes bright enough to blind Anakin. He murmured. Outside, in a hovel half buried in sand, the boy stirred in his sleep. Dreams coiled through him, dreams of speed, of fire, of stars, and in the deepest dark of his mind something else moved, a whisper curling like smoke. Freedom is a lie, only power is real. He turned in his blankets, small hands curling into fists. Above the desert, the twin suns slept, dreaming of war. Chapter 3. The Blind Temple Coruscant. Jewel of the core, city of glass and flame. From orbit it glittered like a forged star, every spire a blade stabbing into the void. Billions moved across its skin, rivers of light in endless motion, a civilization so vast it mistook itself for immortal. Here, in the heart of the galaxy, night was a myth and truth a rumor whispered in shadow. The Jedi Temple rose like a monolith above the chaos, 5 towers crowned with serene spires bathed in golden light. From the outside, it promised peace. Inside, it bled silence. Qui-Gon Jinn stood at the threshold of the council chamber, the boy at his side. Anakin gazed upward, wide-eyed at columns older than the Republic, at statues of robed figures who stared down like cold gods. The chamber beyond was a ring of seats, each bearing a master whose name shaped the galaxy. Windu, Yoda, Kiodi, Mundi, Plo Koon, 13 voices of judgment, 13 blades of doubt. The doors sealed behind them with a sigh like a dying breath. Anakin felt it first, the weight, not of stone or air, but of eyes. The council's gaze was lightless, piercing, stripping him bare. He wanted to shrink, but something in him, the same thing that once raced storms and laughed at death, held firm. He raised his chin though. His heart thudded like war drums. The room smelled of incense and secrets. Bring him forward, Mace Windu said, voice hard as tempered steel. Qui-Gon guided the boy into the circle, his hand resting lightly on Anakin's shoulder, calm, steady, though inside his own storm churned. He felt the tension coiling in the Force, 1,000 threads pulling taut. Something vast loomed behind the veil of the future, and this child was the blade that would cut it open. This is the boy? Windu asked, eyes narrowing. The one I spoke of, Qui-Gon said. Anakin Skywalker. Silence pooled, deep and cold. Key. -AD. Mundi's voice broke it, thin as glass. A slave from Tatooine, brought before the High Council. Qui-Gon's jaw tightened. The Force brought him here. Your faith blinds you, Windu said flatly. Perhaps it blinds you, Qui-Gon countered, calm but edged. Feel his presence. You cannot deny it. All eyes turned to Yoda. The ancient master sat motionless, ears drooping like tired banners, but his gaze burned green fire. He reached with senses older than empires. And he felt it. The boy's heart beat like a drum in the Force, echoing into eternity. Power raw as a newborn star, and beneath it something darker. A shadow coiled in the marrow of that light, clouded. This boy's future is, Yoda murmured. Dangerous, he is. Anakin swallowed hard. Words struck like stones, but he stood his ground. I'm not afraid, he said, voice trembling but true. Yoda's ears twitched. You will be. Qui-Gon stepped forward. He is the chosen one. You've all read the prophecy. Windu's stare hardened. Prophecy misread, could be, or misunderstood, Qui-Gon said. But the Force led me to him. There cannot be chance. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium. Mundi interjected, scoffing. We face separatist threats, not phantoms. The dark side has not vanished, Qui-Gon said, voice low. It waits. It always waits. Yoda closed his eyes. For an instant, he saw it, flames licking temple walls, Jedi falling like shattered statues, a masked figure standing in blood. His eyes opened, and the vision burned away like mist, leaving only the old ache of doubt. Test him, we will. Yoda said at last. The words fell like a gavel. Qui-Gon inclined his head, though frustration simmered beneath his calm. The council, so wise, so blind. Anakin was led to the center of the chamber. Small hands curled at his sides, as objects floated before him, a sphere, a cube, a shard. Of crystal, voices murmured questions. He answered without thought. Shapes flashed in his mind like sparks, and he spoke them before the Masters could blink. Fear, they asked. Yes, he had fear. Loss, yes. Pain, yes. His voice broke when they spoke of his mother. The council noted every tremor like accountants tallying doom. When it was done, the verdict came in silence, a silence thicker than stone. Too old, Windu said. Too full of fear. Qui-Gon's voice cracked the stillness like a blade. He will not be trained. No, Windu said. Anakin felt the words slam into his chest. Not anger, not yet, just cold. A cold that spread through his bones like ice water. His fists tightened until nails bit flesh. Qui-Gon's jaw hardened. Then I will train him myself. Shock rippled through the circle. You have a Padawan, Windu said, voice iron. Obi-Wan is ready, Qui-Gon answered. He will become a knight, and I will take Anakin as my apprentice. Windu's gaze darkened. Qui-Gon, enough, Yoda said softly. The word was quiet, but it bent the air. Decide later, we will. For now, return to Naboo, you must. Qui-Gon bowed stiffly, the storm barely leashed in his chest. He turned, guiding Anakin from the chamber. The boy walked in silence, blue eyes blazing, like twin suns behind his lashes. The doors closed, and in the dark corners of the chamber, doubt festered like rot. Far below the council tower, in the temple's forgotten depths, shadows stirred. A chamber sealed by time, walls lined with ancient holocrons, their glow faint as dying stars. Scripts, carved in tongues older than light, whispered from the stone. Warnings, prophecies, lies. Dust fell like ash as one holocron flickered, blue fire spilling from its heart. A voice spoke from the dark, not in words, but in hunger. Above, Anakin slept in a chamber too vast for his small frame. Dreams coiled through him of stars, of blades of light, of fire swallowing skies, and a voice curled at the edge of those dreams, velvet and venom. You are not theirs. You are mine. Across the city, in a Senate tower draped in gold, a man in robes of crimson gazed toward the temple through tall windows. His smile was soft, patient, predatory. Soon, Chapter 4, knighthood on broken glass war, does not announce itself with drums. It comes like rot beneath the skin, silent, patient, until the fever burns through bone. The galaxy had called it a crisis at first, a dispute, a trade blockade. But now the banners of the Republic flared crimson across the stars, and legions marched under sigils of justice. In their shadows, death multiplied. And in that storm, a boy became a knight, not in the stillness of the temple, not in the ritual of sabers raised in blessing, but on a world that burned like a dying sun, where cities lay in ruin and the air stank of cordite and blood. Anakin Skywalker knelt in the mud, the roar of artillery pounding through the smoke. His hair was slick with rain and ash. In his hands, the hilt of a lightsaber gleamed his saber now. Obi-Wan stood before him, cloak torn, blade ignited, voice hoarse from command. There was no ceremony, no chant of harmony. Only this: by the right of the Council, by the will of the Force, you are a Jedi Knight. The words hung like ghosts. Then the sky tore open with fire. Anakin rose, his blade hissing to life. Blue fire in the dark. The first command came not from the Force, but from war. And he obeyed. The Clone Wars spread like a plague. Star systems drowned in fire. Armies of steel clashed beneath banners of flesh. The Jedi, once guardians of peace, became generals, leaders, executioners. They traded meditation for strategy, prophecy for attrition. They told themselves it was duty. They told themselves it was necessary. Anakin told himself nothing. He fought. He won. His name became a weapon whispered in the ranks. The hero with no fear. Soldiers cheered him. Enemies fled at the sight of his blade. And yet, when the cheering died, the silence clawed at him. Every victory left something broken behind. A village razed, a child orphaned, a promise ash in his throat. And in the quiet between battles, when the stars stared cold through the viewport, visions came, not of glory, of loss. A voice in the dark, soft as breath: she will die. Padma Madala sat in a chamber of white marble, sunlight spilling like honey across her face. To the galaxy, she was a senator now, draped in silks and duty. To Anakin, she was the last piece of sky. They had sworn secrecy, but love does not. Bow to vows. It grows in cracks, roots twisting through stone. She smiled when he entered, a smile that broke him and mended him all at once. For a heartbeat, the war fell away. He knelt at her feet like a pilgrim before a shrine, hands trembling as they touched hers. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I go where I'm needed, he said. Her laughter was soft, but her eyes were storms. And am I the Republic now? No, he murmured, leaning close until her breath brushed his lips. You're what's left of me. She kissed him, and for a moment the galaxy ceased to matter. But later, in the hush of night, as her heartbeat lulled him toward sleep, the vision came again, jagged, merciless. Padme screaming, blood slick as glass, a cradle shattered, and a voice curling through the dark. You will lose her. He woke gasping, sweat cold on his skin, Podnam stirring beside him with worry in her eyes. He lied with a smile. He always lied. But the truth gnawed like a blade in his gut. The council praised him, feared him. They gave him command after command, feeding his hunger to act, to save, to control. Obi-Wan watched with eyes heavy as stone. He saw the cracks forming, the shadows lengthening beneath the boy's grin. You're too reckless, Obi-Wan told him once, on the deck of a gunship streaking toward another siege. And you're too cautious, Anakin shot back, blue eyes blazing. If you'd listened to me on Prezidlen, we wouldn't have lost 1,000 men. Obi-Wan's jaw tightened. 1,000 lives is better than a galaxy lost. You think I'd let that happen? Anakin's voice broke like glass. Can stop it, Obi-Wan. I can end this war. Obi-Wan said nothing, because in the hollow between words he heard something else, a note sharp as steel. Deep beneath Anakin's fire, desperation and fear, fear that sounded like prophecy cracking. Far from the front, in the temple's lower vaults. Dust stirred on shelves, untouched for centuries. Holocrons whispered when no ears listened. Warnings of cycles endless as stars. Of light birthing shadow, of saviors forging chains. A passage carved in stone read, one shall rise in chains and shatter them in blood. One shall bear the name that sunders the sky. The archivists dismissed it as myth. The council never looked. But in the dark, the force coiled like a serpent, watching the boy in the blue cloak who carved through legions with laughter in his throat and fire in his veins. War ended in shattered treaties, not peace. Anakin returned to Coruscant crowned, with glory and scars no one could see. The council greeted him with smiles cold as marble. They spoke of duty. They spoke of patience. They spoke of detachment as if it were salvation. And outside their walls, a senator waited with tears in her eyes, whispering his name like a prayer. Anakin stood between them, the galaxy stretched like broken glass beneath his feet. His blade gleamed at his hip, his dreams howled like beasts, and the shadow behind his shoulder smiled without a face. Chapter 5. The Mandalorian ghost the galaxy had forgotten. Mandalore once, its name had been spoken in the same breath as terror and triumph, carved into the annals of war like a scar. Its warriors had been fire given flesh, a creed tempered in blood, their armor a hymn to conquest. Jedi remembered. Jedi never forgot, for Mandalorians had nearly broken them 1,000 years ago in the fires of the Mandalorian Wars. But centuries had ground the proud into dust. Their crusades ended in ashes. Their cities fell silent. Their blades rusted in tombs of Beskar and bone. Mandalore endured, yes, but as a husk of its former self. A pacifist heart beating beneath the armor of its past. Yet, in the cracks of that peace, something stirred, a whisper, a name. Deathwatch. It began as sparks in the dark cells scattered. Across the outer rim, men and women who spat on pacifism and prayed to the old gods of war. They donned armor scoured by time, colors faded but hearts burning. They spoke of glory, of vengeance, of Mandalore reborn in fire. And in secret they reached out to smugglers, to bounty hunters, to separatists who smiled like wolves. By the time the Republic noticed, the flames had already spread. The briefing holocast blew light across Anakin Skywalker's face, sharpening his jaw into something almost cruel. The chamber thrummed with the quiet pulse of hyperspace engines. Clone officers stood at attention, their armor reflecting the glow like pale ghosts. Obi-Wan spoke, his voice clipped but calm, always calm, like the eye of a storm. Intelligence confirms Deathwatch insurgents have seized control of Kalevala. Duchess Satine believes their leader, a former governor, has pledged loyalty to the separatists. If true, Mandalore becomes a staging ground for Dooku. Let me guess. Anakin said, arms folded, shadows knifing across his cheek. The council wants us to handle it, delicately. Obi-Wan's sigh was almost a laugh. You do remember what diplomacy means. Talk first, fight later. Anakin's grin was a blade. What if they start shooting? Then, Obi-Wan said dryly, you do what you always do, win, break. Things, the clones chuckled under their breath. Anakin's grin widened, but behind it lay a hunger he did not name, a hunger to end the war, to crush its roots before they spread. Every battle felt like sand slipping through his fingers. The more he fought, the more the galaxy bled. And now, Mandalore, the gunships roared through a sky of iron, slicing clouds with fire. Below, Kalevala smoldered, plains blackened by artillery, cities cracked like old bone. The Death Watch banners snapped in the wind, crimson sigils slashed across fields of grey. Mandalorian warriors stood on ramparts in Beskar, dented but unbroken, jetpacks gleaming in the smoke. Their rifles spat fire as Republic gunships descended like steel locusts. Anakin hit the ground in a storm of dust and heat, lightsaber igniting. With a shriek of blue, clones poured around him, blasters barking, the air a furnace of plasma and screams. Jetpacks roared overhead, Mandalorians diving like falcons, rifles blazing. One slammed into Anakin with a shock of armor and rage. He caught the strike, twisted, drove his blade through Beskar until the air stank of scorched metal. They called him hero, they called him savior, but in the crimson light of battle, he felt only the old thrill, the rush of speed, the purity of violence. Here there were no counsels, no chains of doubt. Only the dance, only the kill. Another warrior came at him, taller armor painted in cobalt and ash, a visor like a black mirror. Their blades clashed, sparks spraying like stars. For a moment Anakin saw himself reflected in that visor. Not a Jedi, not a savior, but a silhouette wreathed in fire. The Mandalorian lunged, jetpack screaming, blade arcing for his throat. Anakin pivoted, faster than thought, and severed the man's head from his shoulders. The helmet rolled into the mud, visor staring at nothing. When it ended, the field was smoke and ruin. Corpses lay like broken statues, Beskar gleaming beneath ash. The clones dragged survivors from the rubble, binders clicking. Obi-Wan's voice crackled through the comlink, edged with fatigue. Kalevala secured. Minimal separatist presence confirmed. Death Watch cells scattered. Anakin stood amid the wreckage, his blade still dripping light. The wind cut cold through the smoke, carrying whispers from the dead. We were warriors once, so were you, he stared. At the fallen Mandalorians, their armor dented but proud, and felt a flicker deep in his marrow. Something sharp, something strange. Not triumph, not pity, kinship. The Jedi called them zealots. The Republic called them terrorists. But Anakin saw more. He saw men who defied extinction, who clung to honor even as the galaxy ground them to dust. He saw himself a child of chains, burning to be free, drowning in a code that promised salvation and gave only silence. General, Rex's voice cut through the fog. Anakin blinked. The wind died. The whispers sank back into the smoke. He clipped his saber to his belt, the hum fading like a dying star. Move out, he said. Night fell like a blade across Kalevala. In the ruins of a shattered fortress, Anakin stood alone, staring at the sigil scorched into the stone. A mythosaur skull, jaws open in eternal hunger. Behind him, the clones made camp, their laughter thin as glass in the dark. Ahead, the horizon bled fire. He reached out with the Force, feeling its currents coil around the corpses, the ash, the silence. Once Mandalore had stood against the Jedi and nearly won. Once warriors had faced destiny and spat in its eye, and now they were ghosts. He wondered if the Jedi would end the same way. A shadow stirred at the edge of his thoughts, soft as silk, sharp as poison. You are not a ghost. You are the storm that ends them all. Anakin closed his eyes. The wind answered Dot far away in a tower of polished black. Darth Sidious smiled. Chapter 6, Shadows of the Clone War. The galaxy was fire. Flames licked the edges of 1,000 worlds. Star systems burning like pyres under banners of war. The holomaps glowed crimson where separatist droids marched in endless legions, where fleets clashed in orbits veined with debris. The Republic stretched like a wounded beast, bleeding soldiers and credits into void, yet calling it victory. The Jedi called it duty, but duty had teeth. It chewed them to the bone. Anakin Skywalker strode through the ruins of Jabium, his boots, grinding mud slick with rain and blood. The sky was iron, fractured by lightning, and the earth beneath was a grave. Around him, clone troopers worked in silence, gathering helmets stripped of heads, stacking them in neat white towers that mocked the word honor. He did not count the dead. He had stopped counting weeks ago. Their faces haunted him regardless, bleeding into his dreams like ghosts that would not die. Yet the war demanded more. Always more. Obi-Wan spoke softly behind him, voice carrying the weight of a man who had seen too much and said too little. We hold the line here, Anakin. If Jabium falls, it won't. Anakin cut in, his tone a blade. Not while I'm here. His hand hovered near his saber like a promise carved in steel. Obi-Wan's eyes lingered, reading what Anakin did not say. I will burn this world to save it. The silence stretched like wire. Then came the signal. Another assault wave breaching the eastern trench. There was no time for philosophy. Only war. They fought in mud so thick it swallowed boots, under skies that screamed fire. Anakin led the charge, saber a streak of blue lightning cleaving through. Ranks of droids. He moved like a storm given flesh, blaster bolts bending around him as if the Force itself could not bear to see him fall. Clones roared his name, General Skywalker, voices rising above the carnage like a hymn. And for a heartbeat, he almost believed them. Almost believed he was what they saw, a hero, a savior. But in the quiet after, when the last droid lay smoking and the only sound was the hiss of rain on steel, he felt the truth coil cold in his gut. He was winning battles and losing himself. That night, in the hollow of a shattered bunker, Anakin sat with his back to the wall, helmeted corpses piled like broken dolls beyond the door. The glow of a field lamp painted his face in hard light, shadows carving him hollow. Podmas Hallow flickered in his palm, her voice soft, a melody of another life. Arnie, please, come back to Coruscant soon. You sound so tired. He wanted to tell her everything, the blood, the screams, the way the Force felt different now, heavy as chains. He wanted to tell her about the dreams. Instead, he lied with a smile. Soon, he said, I'll be home soon. But the word tasted like Ashdot when sleep came. It was jagged. He dreamed of Padme screaming, her hands slick with blood, her breath a ragged rattle. He reached for her, but chains dragged his arms down. He saw fire swallowing cities, temples toppling like sandcastles beneath a black tide, and through it all a voice coiled like smoke. You could stop this. You could save her, if you had the will. He woke gasping, nails biting his palms, sweat slick on his skin. The war raged outside, but the louder war was in his veins. On Coruscant, the Senate Tower blazed with light, its spires knifing into the smog-streaked sky. Inside, politics danced like carrion birds. Palpatine watched them all from his throne of gold and lies, his smile a wound stitched in silk. Reports of battles flickered across the chamber, each casualty another stone in the wall of fear he built around the Republic's throat. And always his thoughts returned to the boy. No, the man who fought like wrath, incarnate, and yet trembled at shadows of loss. Soon, he whispered in silence. Soon I will have him. In the temple, Yoda sat in meditation, but the currents of the Force were no longer clear streams. They were storm and sludge, visions clashing like blades. He saw armies burning, the shadow of a helm black as void, a mask staring with eyes like suns drowned in blood. He reached deeper, seeking light, but the light faltered, swallowed by something vast and hollow, a hunger, old as the stars, older than the Sith. For an instant, he thought he heard it breathe, far below, in the vault of prophecy, a chamber sealed by time and arrogance. The holocrons pulsed with a sickly glow. Scripts, etched in forgotten tongues, shimmered like wounds reopening. A fragment whispered from the dark, "He who fears to lose will forge his chains. He who loves beyond death will shatter the sky." Dust swirled, as if stirred by a hand that was not there. And in the silence, something laughed without sound. The war dragged on. Each victory birthed another wound. Anakin carved his legend in steel and smoke, but every triumph left a hollow in his chest where hope used to live. Padme's messages were lifelines fraying thin. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her dying. Not a dream now, but a prophecy gnawing at the edges of his sanity. He begged the Force for answers, but the Force was silent. Or perhaps it whispered truths he refused to hear. One evening, aboard a cruiser streaking through hyperspace, Obi-Wan found him staring into the stars, like a man reading omens. "You haven't slept," Obi-Wan said. "Neither have you." Anakin replied without looking. Silence settled, taut as a wire. At last, Obi-Wan spoke, voice low. "You're changing, Anakin." The words struck harder than any blade. For a moment, the boy inside him flinched. Then the storm rose, and his jaw set like Durasteel. "Maybe the galaxy needs me to change." Obi-Wan had no answer, perhaps because, in the hollow of his heart, he feared the boy was right. The cruiser shuddered, alarms howling. Another battle awaited, another world to save, another piece of himself to burn. Anakin rose, cloak flaring like a shadow with edges of fire. And far away, in a chamber lined with masks, Darth Sidious smiled, as if hearing the first crack in a chain-dot chapter. 7. The forbidden chamber. Coruscant's night was a fraud. A velvet mask draped over a world that never slept. From the temple spires, the city stretched in rivers of gold and crimson, towers piercing the clouds like blades. But beneath that glittering skin, shadows ran deep, and deeper still, under the polished marble and sanctums of serenity, a door waited that no Jedi had opened in centuries. A door that should never have opened at all. Anakin Skywalker walked alone through the silent halls, his boots whispering against stone older than memory. The temple slept, but he could feel its heart beating beneath the floor, slow, heavy, like a giant dreaming in chains. His comlink was dead by choice. Obi-Wan thought him resting after the Rim sieges. Podman thought him safe. Let them think. For nights now, whispers had haunted him, not in dreams, but in waking silence. Whispers like threads pulling him down, down, to where truth lay buried in dust. The lift took him lower than any Padawan had ever gone. Past archives humming with holocrons, past vaults of Kyber sealed in song-steel doors. His key code was not his own. He had taken it from a master's hand when the man slept, guided by a voice that said, "This is yours by right." At last, the lift sighed open to a corridor carved not by machines but by hands that believed stone could hold eternity. Torches guttered in sconces, flames shivering like breath. And there, At the corridor's throat stood a gate of black durasteel, veined with veins of crimson, as if the metal itself had bled. Upon it, words burned in a tongue that clawed at his mind. To know the future is to forge its chains. The lock recognized him. How, he did not ask. The gate groaned open like a beast waking from sleep. The chamber was a wound in the world. Its walls were ribs of obsidian arching toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Between them hung holocrons, hundreds, glowing like stars drowned in deep water. Blue, green, violet, and some a red so dark they seemed to drink the light. Statues loomed in the gloom, their faces eaten by time. Jedi with blades raised, Sith with claws of stone, warriors without names, and at the center an altar of black glass, cracked by age, upon which rested a scroll sealed in gold. The air smelled of dust and storms. The force here was not peace, it was hunger. Anakin stepped inside, and the door sealed behind him with a sigh like the last breath of a dying god. For a moment, he only listened to the hum of the holocrons, to the slow throb of his own pulse. Then, drawn by a gravity he did not understand, he approached the altar. His fingers brushed the seal. It burned cold. The scroll uncoiled like a serpent, spilling words across the glass in letters that shimmered like molten iron. One shall rise in chains and break them in blood. One shall be light's end and shadow's crown. One shall bind the stars in silence and unmake the song of the Force. His throat tightened. He read the next lines, heart pounding like drums of war. He shall love beyond death, and that love shall be his doom. He shall seek to save, and in saving he shall destroy. His name shall be. The last words were shattered, eaten by time. But the fragment that remained glared like a blade. Sky Anakin staggered back as if struck. The chamber tilted, shadows lunging like beasts. Destroyer, the word howled in his skull. No, that was not him. He was a savior, a protector. He fought to end this war, to save the woman who was his life. The Jedi did not understand. They spoke of letting go, of serenity, of chains that strangled the heart. But what was love, if not the will to fight the storm? What was power, if not the fire to hold back death itself? He clenched the altar until cracks spidered beneath his hands. Something stirred in the dark. A holocron flared crimson, its light crawling up the walls like blood. A voice spilled from it, low, velvet, infinite. Do you see now, child? They would make you a pawn of prophecy, a leash for their brittle order. But you are more. You are destiny unchained. Anakin spun, breath ragged, but the chamber held only shadows. The voice purred, closer now, inside his bones. They fear you. Even now, they plot to deny you the one thing you seek. They call it love, but they will tear it from your hands in the name of peace. Images flared in his mind. Yoda's solemn gaze, Windu's iron stare, their voices cold, too dangerous, too full of fear. He must be stopped. Then Padma, her face pale, her lips whispering his name before darkness swallowed her. No, he snarled, but the word cracked. The holocrons thrummed like hearts, their glow pulsing in time with his fury. The voice coiled tighter, soft as silk, sharp as venom. What if I told you there is a way? What if I told you death itself can be broken? His breath caught. How? Silence, then laughter, sweet as rot. Seek me. When the hour comes, I will find you, and together we will tear fate from the stars. The holocron dimmed, the chamber hushed, though its silence was now a scream. Anakin stood trembling, the scroll clenched in his fist like a blade. The words burned in his mind, carving out the last refuge of doubt. He was not the destroyer. He was the one who would save everything, no matter the cost. Above, the temple slept. In its spires, masters dreamed of balance, while darkness gnawed at their roots. And in a Senate tower, wreathed in shadow, a man in crimson robes felt the tremor in the force and smiled. For the door had opened, and the boy was walking through. Chapter 8. Padme's eyes, in the fire coruscant, glimmered like a jewel drowned in smoke. The war was ending, the Senate claimed, its spires crowned with banners, its skylanes roaring with the hymn of triumph. But Anakin Skywalker felt no triumph as his starfighter descended through the haze. Victory tasted of iron and ash. The roar of the engines could not drown the whisper that coiled through his veins. You are too late. You will lose her. The landing bay thrummed with voices, soldiers cheering the hero with no fear, senators craning for a glimpse of the man who carved empires from steel. He smiled because they needed it, because masks were easy. But inside, something hollow gaped wider with every cheer. He walked through corridors of glass and gold, through halls that stank of incense and lies, and thought only of her. Padme, she waited in the apartment where the city's heart glowed molten beneath a sky, veined with traffic fire. When he stepped through the door, she was there, a silhouette framed by towers and stars. Her eyes wide, her lips trembling like the edge of a blade. And then she was in his arms, and for a heartbeat, the war ceased to exist. He crushed her against him, burying his face in the warmth of her hair, breathing as if he had drowned and surfaced at last. You're here? She whispered, and it was not a question but a prayer, always. He murmured, though the word cracked like glass in his throat. Later, in the hush of night, when the city's roar dulled to a distant storm, she took his hands and pressed them to her belly. Arnie, she said, voice trembling, I'm pregnant. The world stilled. The war, the Senate, the temple, all fell away. And there was only this, only her, only the fragile spark of life thrumming beneath his palms. Joy surged, fierce and blinding, but with it came terror, black and merciless. For in that instant, the visions returned. Padme, a bed of white sheets, soaked red, her breath rattling, her eyes dimming as his hands clawed at chains he could not break. He kissed her, and the kiss was fire and salt, a vow carved in silence. I will not let you die. That night, sleep was a knife. The dream struck like a storm, her screams, his helplessness, death grinning like a mask. He woke gasping, sweat burning his skin, the force thrumming wild in his veins. He stumbled to the viewport, staring at the city blazing below, and for the first time he hated its light. It mocked him with promises of order while everything he loved balanced on the edge of a blade. He went to the temple seeking counsel, but found only marble and judgment. Yoda sat small upon his throne, his eyes deep as wells. Troubling visions. You have, the master said, voice carved from stone, of pain, of death. In your heart, fear coils. Anakin's jaw clenched. They're not just dreams. They're warnings, perhaps, but the future, always in motion it is. Let go, you must, of all you fear to lose. The words struck like ice. Let go. How could he let go when the thought of losing her burned like acid in his lungs? He left. Without bowing, the silence between them a chasm yawning wide. The council spoke of trust. but their eyes followed him like hunters in the dark. They gave him no seat, no certainty, only veiled suspicion and chains of protocol. In their fear, they drove him further from their light, into the shadow where another waited with open hands. Palpatine's chamber was a sanctum of gold, drowned in dusk. The Chancellor greeted him with warmth soft as silk, voice low, coiling like smoke. "My boy," he said, pouring wine that gleamed like blood, "you have done more for this republic than all their councils combined. Yet still they treat you as a child." Anakin said nothing, but his silence was a wound. Palpatine's smile curved like a blade. "They do not trust you, Anakin. They never will. They fear your strength. They fear what you might become." Anakin's fists tightened. "They fear losing their power." "Perhaps," Palpatine murmured, leaning closer, his eyes gleaming amber in the candlelight. "But you seek no power, only peace, only to protect those you love." Anakin's breath caught, the words striking deep. "How do you? Because I know you," the Chancellor whispered, "better than they ever will. And I tell you this, there are ways, paths that the Jedi would forbid, powers that could save her." The air thickened, his voice dropping to a hiss that trembled like the edge of eternity. Powers over life and death. The chamber pulsed with silence. Anakin's heart pounded like drums of war. He tasted the words like forbidden fruit, bitter and sweet. "Is it possible?" he breathed. Palpatine's smile was a wound that never bled. "The dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider unnatural." The words slithered like a serpent between them. Anakin felt the world tilt, the walls closing in, the light outside dimming to ash. He saw Padme again, dying, his hands red, his scream shattering the stars. And then he saw her alive, whole, smiling in sunlight that never faded. The choice was no choice at all. "Teach me," he wanted to say, but the word curdled in his throat. Not yet. Soon that night, he held Padme on the balcony as the city glowed like molten glass. Her head rested against his chest, her voice soft as falling ash. "Arnie, what's happening to us?" He kissed her hair, tasting salt that might have been hers or his. "Nothing," he lied. "Everything is going to be perfect." Below them, Coruscant burned in rivers of light. Above them, the stars stared cold and pitiless. And within him, something old and nameless stirred, whispering with the voice he had heard in the dark. "Anything, Anakin, anything." He tightened his arms around her and whispered into her hair, a vow forged in fire. "I won't let you die." His breath shuddered, and the city roared like a furnace, casting them in flames. For in that moment, the boy who once dreamed of freedom was gone. In his place stood a man who would break the sky to hold what he loved, even if it damned him. Chapter 9, Nightfall. The temple bleeds the sky above Coruscant bled fire. Lightning forked between towers that scraped the heavens, thunder rolling like war drums across the endless city. In the Senate Tower, shadow pooled like oil as Palpatine sat upon his throne, a smile coiled upon his lips. His voice was silk over steel as he spoke to Anakin, who knelt before him. The flicker of stormlight carving his face into a mask of hunger and doubt. "The war is nearly over," the Chancellor murmured, hands folded like the wings of a carrion bird. "Grievous is dead. The separatists will scatter. And then peace. True peace." His eyes burned amber in the gloom. "But only if we are strong enough to seize it." Anakin's gaze flickered, restless as flame. His mind was a furnace. Padme's face seared upon its walls, her smile, her laughter, the warmth of her breath, and over it all the scream, the blood, the stillness. He swallowed hard. "You said there's a way," he rasped, "to stop death." Palpatine's smile deepened. "There is, but not through the Jedi." He rose, a shadow stretching long and crooked across the chamber. "Their code binds them in weakness. They will never teach you what you need to know, but I can." His voice dropped, low and velvet. "The dark side can unlock powers beyond imagining, powers to save the one you love." Anakin's breath caught, the words striking like a blade to the gut. "Tell me how." "In time," Palpatine whispered, circling him like a serpent. "When you are ready. But know this, my boy, the Jedi will come for me. Even now, they plot treason. They fear my control. They fear you, and if they destroy me." He let the words trail, like a noose tightening in silence. Then all hope dies. The doors hissed open. 4 Jedi strode in, cloaks billowing, blades at their belts. At their head was Mace Windu, eyes hard as obsidian. His voice was a hammer. "Chancellor Palpatine, you are under arrest." Time fractured. Anakin froze, breath snarling in his throat. Palpatine sighed, slow and weary, as if the weight of the galaxy pressed upon his shoulders. "So it is treason, then." And in a breath, the mask fell. His saber screamed scarlet fire, and the chamber became a storm of death. Windu's blade met his in a crash of light and fury. The other Jedi lunged, but Palpatine spun like a scythe of shadows, his laughter slicing through their screams. One fell with his throat carved open, another with his spine severed in a blaze of crimson. The third staggered back, head rolling across the floor like a broken crown. And then there were 2, Windu and the Sith Lord, locked in a clash that shook the walls, lightning painting their faces in hellfire. Anakin stood frozen, heart battering his ribs. His world tilted. The Chancellor, his mentor, his friend, revealed as the very darkness the Order had feared, and yet the voice in his skull hissed louder than ever. "If he dies, she dies. If you let him fall, Padme will burn." He gripped his saber, sweat slicking his palms. Windu drove Palpatine back, their blades shrieking sparks, until at last the Sith crashed against the sill, lightning vomiting from his hands. The storm outside roared in answer, bolts ripping the sky. Windu raised his saber high, its violet blaze a sentence carved in light. "He's too dangerous to be kept alive." Anakin's heart stopped. Too dangerous. Like they had called him. Like they would call Panem if they knew. His vision blurred red. "It's not the Jedi way," he shouted, but Windu's eyes never wavered. He must die, and in that breath, choice died. Anakin moved faster than thought, faster than fear, his blade screaming from its hilt. It cleaved the air and struck, severing bone and fate. Windu's scream was a broken hymn as his body spiraled into the storm, swallowed by lightning and abyss. Silence fell, not peace, but the silence of something vast and irreparable breaking. The silence of destiny bleeding out on the floor. Anakin stood shaking, his saber dripping blue fire. His breath came in ragged gasps. Palpatine rose from the shadows, his face a ruin of wrinkles and malice, eyes burning suns drowned in pitch. "You have done well, my apprentice," he hissed. The words slithered into Anakin's soul, cold and final. "You are no longer Anakin Skywalker. You are Darth Vader." The name struck like iron, branding his spirit. He wanted to scream, but his voice was ash. Only one thought burned Padme. Save Podman, the Sith Lord's cloak curled around him like wings of night. Go now, he whispered, venom sweet as honey. The Jedi are traitors, every one of them. They will kill you, kill her, kill your child. Leave none alive. And so the temple burned. The gunships came at dusk, their bellies vomiting fire. Clones stormed the halls with blasters snarling, their faces hidden behind masks of white death. The Jedi met them in a hurricane of sabers and screams. Masters fell with blades singing, Padawans with names no one would remember. Statues toppled, archives shattered, the air thick with smoke and blood. And through it all moved a shadow, a man-shaped storm. His saber, a river of slaughter. Vader, he cut down knights who had sparred with him, friends who had laughed with him, voices that had called him brother. He killed them all. His heart was ice, his hands were fire. In the nursery, children huddled like birds beneath shattered wings. A boy stepped forward, eyes wide, voice trembling. Master Skywalker, what do we do? For a breath, the mask cracked. He saw their faces so small, so bright, the future he had once dreamed to protect. His hand shook, then the darkness closed like a fist, and the blade ignited, blue light drowning their screams. By dawn, the temple was a carcass. Its towers belched smoke like funeral pyres. Its halls were rivers of blood and ash. Holocrons lay shattered, their secrets bleeding into silence. And on the steps, beneath a sky that wept fire, knelt Darth Vader, his saber dripping, his soul hollow as the void. Above him, the city roared in ignorance. Below him, corpses whispered names he would never speak again, far across the skyline. In the Senate chamber, bathed in gold, Palpatine stood before the hollowed husk of the Republic and declared its rebirth. His voice thundered like prophecy as the storm raged beyond the glass. The Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire for a safe and secure society. Applause shook the towers, a tidal wave of chains forged in cheers, and in the shadows, the new Emperor smiled, for the galaxy was his, and his fist was Vader. But on the balcony of an ivory tower, Padme Amidala stared at the smoke clawing the heavens, her hands trembling over the swell of her belly, her eyes filled with firelight. Her heart whispered what her lips could not. What have you done, Anakin? What have you become? And in the temple's ruins, the wind carried a single word through halls of death, a word that was no longer a name, but a curse, a crown, a dirge. Vader. Chapter 10, The Empire of Ashes. Galaxy woke to chains wrapped in velvet. Across the holonet, the Senate roared approval as Palpatine's voice thundered like judgment, in order to ensure our security and continuing stability. The Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire. Applause erupted, a tidal wave of ignorance washing away freedom. Thunder rolled beyond the Senate dome, drowning out the death of 1,000 years. Democracy did not fall with screams, but with cheers, and in the shadows of that triumph, Anakin Skywalker ceased to exist. He stood on the obsidian deck of a starship cutting through the void. Cloaked in black, the taste of ash thick on his tongue. His hands still trembled, though not from guilt, for guilt was gone, burned away in fire. Only hunger remained. Hunger and the voice that purred like silk through his bones. Soon, my apprentice, soon the power to stop death will be yours. Padme's face swam before his eyes, her smile flickering like a candle in storm wind. He clenched his fists. Hold on, I will save you. But destiny was already bleeding out Padme. Amidala sat in a chamber aboard a silver ship fleeing Coruscant, the stars sliding past like ghosts. Her hands cupped the swell of her belly, her breath ragged with fear. She had seen the smoke rising from the temple, had heard whispers, Jedi slaughtered, younglings murdered, and in her heart bloomed a terror she could not name, a question that burned her lips. Anakin, what have you done? Mustafar burned like a wound in the void. Its rivers of magma belched smoke and cinders, painting the sky in hues of blood. Here, in the furnace of creation, empires were born and broken. Here, Darth Vader waited, his cloak whipping in the heat, his eyes twin coals set in hollows of rage. When Padme's ship descended through the storm, something cracked in him, something fragile and human. He ran to meet her, and for a heartbeat, the world was whole. She came down the ramp, her face pale as ash, her voice trembling. Anakin, what they're saying, tell me it isn't true. He seized her hands, crushed them to his lips, the words spilling like flame. I've done this for us, for our child, for you, don't you see? I can stop, Death Pam. We don't have to hide anymore. We can rule this galaxy together. His eyes blazed like suns gone mad. No more weakness, no more chains. Tears glittered on her lashes. This is not you. Her voice broke like glass. Come away with me, please. He shook his head, fury and fear twisting his face into something monstrous. You don't understand. I can't lose you. I won't. His grip tightened. I am more powerful than any Jedi. I can save you. Her breath hitched, not with love, but with dread. And in her eyes he saw it, not faith, but fear. Obi-Wan stepped. From the shadows, the scream that tore from Anakin's throat was not a word, but a wound. He spun, saber igniting with a snarl. Blue fire mirrored in Obi-Wan's blade. The duel erupted like a storm, unbound steel, and fury clashing on bridges of black stone, sparks raining into oceans of fire. They moved like gods in wrath, like brothers torn by doom. Each strike carved not flesh, but memory. Each clash sang of betrayal. And in the end, it was not strength, but grief that felled the chosen son. A single arc of blue, a scream, a fall into flame. Mustafar swallowed him whole. When darkness lifted, pain was all that remained. His body was a ruin, his limbs charred stumps, his skin a map of agony. And through the haze came a voice, sweet. As venom, you live, my apprentice. The Jedi are gone. Padme is dead. The words struck like bolts. No. His breath rasped, a broken engine. You're lying. You killed her, Sidious murmured, his smile a crescent of knives. In your anger, you killed her. The scream that followed shattered heaven. Metal swallowed his flesh. Durasteel limbs locked onto raw bone. Servo motors whining like ghosts. The mask descended, sealing him in night. And as the last light fled, a sound rose from the abyss, a breath hollow as a grave. The breath of Vader, the breath of the end. He staggered to his feet upon a world of black glass, wrapped in armor that was coffin and crown. The galaxy trembled. The stars seemed to dim. And far away, in a cradle of silver light, a child wailed, a boy who would bear his name into a dawn not yet written. The Empire had risen, the Jedi were ash, and hope was a spark smothered in shadow. Chapter 11. The Outer Darkness, the Galaxy. Burned in whispers, Jedi voices, once a chorus spanning stars, fell silent one by one, smothered in screams and blaster fire. Worlds that had known their light now crouched in shadow, their skies haunted by the black silhouette of Imperial Star. Destroyers, where peace had promised to bloom, only ashes bloomed now, and through those ashes walked Darth Vader. He was a shadow cast in iron, his breath a rasping dirge that curdled the air. Planets shuddered when his fleet appeared in orbit. Governors bowed, and those who did not learned that mercy had died with the Jedi. He spoke little, he did not need to. Fear was his tongue, and death his grammar. When whispers rose of survivors, he came like a storm, precise, relentless, a god of slaughter. The Inquisitorius hunted in his name, but when they failed, Vader himself came, and none lived to tell of it. Yet beneath the mask, the silence was worse than war. For the screams of Mustafar had not faded. Obi-Wan's voice was a scar on his soul. You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. He heard it in every breath, every servo hiss, every midnight when stars wheeled cold and mocking above and beneath. That echo was another softer, crueler Padme's last gaze, her lips shaping his name, her breath dying under his hands. You did this. Sidious's lie had chained him in iron, but the truth was worse. Part of him believed it. Far away on a desert world scorched by twin suns, Obi-Wan Kenobi watched those same stars and wondered how light could still exist. His robes were worn, his saber buried in sand, his heart a ruin. The name Kenobi was a curse now, a ghost whispered in the alleys of broken worlds. He lived not as warrior, but as wraith, a shadow tasked with guarding a spark. Luke, the boy, slept beneath a sky bleeding gold, his breath soft, his dreams untainted, and Obi-Wan whispered prayers to a force that had abandoned them both. Let him never become what I could not stop. But the force is not silence, it is memory, and in the hollow chambers of its song, the prophecy writhed like a severed serpent. The chosen one, not savior, not destroyer, but wound. Balance was not peace, it was blood, and the scales had shattered. Years bled like ink into the void. Vader crushed rebellions before they had names. He walked upon rivers of fire and oceans of glass. He killed because Sidious commanded, but deeper still, he killed because it was the only language left to him. And yet, sometimes, when the battle smoke curled and the stars burned cold, he saw her. Padma, not in death, but in light, laughing in the Senate halls, her hand warm in his, her voice promising forever. He reached for her and found only metal. On a forgotten moon, he found another ghost, Ahsoka Tano. The jewel was a hymn of grief, carved in blades of fire, the clash of what he was against, what he might have been. Her voice cracked as her mask fell, eyes blazing. I won't leave. You, not this time. And his voice, jagged as broken glass. Then you will die. When she fell into the shadows, something inside him tore, and still he did not bleed. The Emperor watched and smiled, for the darkness was his, and the galaxy his throne. Yet in the deep of the night, when stars glared like unblinking eyes, Vader would pause, breath rasping in a cage of steel, and wonder if this silence was victory or damnation, for the prophecy was not dead. It slept, and in its dream, two suns rose over a desert world, and a boy stared at the horizon, not knowing that the darkness was his father. Chapter 12, Echoes of the Mandalorian, flamed the galaxy, knelt beneath imperial boots. But not all worlds. Bent without blood. Far beyond the glittering core, in the shadows of forgotten wars, Mandalore stirred from its grave. Once, its banners had darkened the stars. Once, its warriors had made Jedi bleed. Now, its cities lay in ruins, its skies silent, save for the whisper of scavengers. Yet in the ashes, embers, SMOLDERED, the dark saber had returned. It moved like a ghost through hands, eager and unworthy, a blade that was not metal but myth. To wield it was to claim more than power. It was to summon the dead, to wear the weight of a creed older than empires. Deathwatch fragments gathered in the dark, their armor scarred, their oaths cracked but not broken. They whispered of Mandalore reborn, of a fire that would scourge imperial chains. But whispers do not frighten Sith, and when whispers reached the Emperor, he sent his shadow. Darth Vader came to Sundari. The once proud domes gleamed no more. They sagged like broken crowns, their veins crawling with rust. The air reeked of old war and new rot. Clad in black, his breath hissing like a blade in a forge, Vader walked the shattered streets, flanked by stormtroopers whose boots struck echoes from bones buried in dust. The Mandalorians met him in silence, their visors like cold moons, their rifles raised, and for a heartbeat the past lived again. Jedi and Mandalorian, faith against faith, creed against code. The battle was a hymn of iron and fire. Jetpacks screamed, blasters spat rivers of red, Beskar sang against the bite of the saber. Vader moved through them like a tempest, his blade a crimson scythe, his will crushing steel and bone alike. Rockets curved in the air only to falter and crumple beneath an unseen fist. Men who had slain beasts and Jedi fell choking on their own screams, dragged into the molten glow of his saber. The dark saber itself flashed black fire in the hands of a warlord drunk on dreams. For a moment their blades clashed, shadow against night, lightless edge hissing against the Sith's blood-red fury. And then the dream ended. The dark saber fell, its wielder cleaved in two, his creed scattering like ash in the wind. When it was over, Mandalore burned anew. Cities cracked, glass domes shattered into suns of shrapnel. In orbit, cruisers rained fire like judgment. The old ways died beneath the heel of a new order, yet not all embers were quenched. In secret tunnels, in the bellies of shattered ships, children huddled beneath warriors who swore by the Resilon air that Mandalore would rise again. They spoke of a future in whispers of foundlings and clans reborn, of a creed carried not in crowns, but in armor and blood. Vader stood amid the ruin, the darksaber heavy in his gauntlet. Its edge drank the light, humming with a hunger older than his chains. For an instant he felt its song, a hymn of war, of honor bound in steel, of freedom paid in blood. Once he might have understood it. Once, before the mask, he crushed the thought as he crushed all ghosts. The saber vanished into imperial vaults, its legend buried beneath lies. Yet even Vader knew, some fires do not die. They sleep and far, away beyond the reach of empires. A child drew breath, a child who would walk the Mandalorian path, carrying a creed older than crowns. A child who would change the shape of destiny with silence and steel. But that day was not yet written. For now there was only smoke, and a man who was no longer a man, staring at the bones of a warrior faith and feeling nothing, or almost nothing. Chapter 13. The child in the Force the galaxy groaned beneath the weight of an empire that claimed eternity. Star destroyers proud, the void like wolves of steel, their shadows strangling suns. Worlds bent or burned, Names vanished into silence. Yet in that silence, something stirred, small, hidden, fragile as breath. The Force had not died. It whispered still, curling through forgotten halls, through shattered temples, through the dark where hunters stalked the last sparks of light dot. And in that dark, a child waited. He was small enough to fit in an armored palm, yet in his veins thrummed a song older than stars. Green skin, wide eyes, ears like curved blades, a shape rare even when Jedi thrived. Now he was singular, a relic and a promise, born of a lineage the galaxy had all but buried. His name was Grogu, though few would speak it aloud. To the Empire, he was no child, but a prize. His blood shimmered with secrets, the same secrets that once lured a Skywalker into chains. Rumors slithered through Imperial corridors of experiments, cloaked in shadow, of vats humming in vaults where no sun had ever shone. Kaminoans whispered in fear, moths spoke in hunger. And when those whispers reached the Emperor, his smile curved like a blade. He had failed to bind the chosen one in life. Now he sought to bind its echo in flesh, so Vader hunted. The command was simple: scour the stars, leave no stone unturned, no sanctuary unbroken. Jedi were embers now, but embers could flare into flame. And this child, this fragment of forgotten power, could ignite a fire the Sith could not quench. Vader obeyed without question. Yet when he reached for the presence in the dark, when the current of the Force brushed his soul, he faltered. It was small, fragile, yet bright as the first dawn. And beneath that light was something else, something that twisted like a knife, the echo of himself. Of the boy who once stared at twin suns and dreamed of freedom. Of the child the galaxy devoured. He crushed the thought. Dreams were ash, names were graves. He was no longer Anakin Skywalker. He was the fist that smothered hope. But hope does not smother easily. The hunt stretched across shattered sectors, through derelict cruisers, burned temples, moons veiled in storm. Vader left nothing but ruin. He slaughtered protectors, shattered sanctuaries, turned rivers to blood. And yet the child slipped away, spirited into shadow by hands sworn to a creed older than crowns. Mandalorian hands dot far beyond the Emperor's. Gaze in a galaxy collapsing under its own iron weight. A wanderer took the child and did not ask why. He carried him through fire and void, through worlds where law was a ghost and honor a blade. In his heart a vow older than the Sith, older than the Republic. This is the way. Vader never saw his face, never felt the warmth of the tiny hand curling around Beskar, never heard the coo that softened men who had forgotten gentleness. He only felt the echo distant, mocking, until it faded into the labyrinth of time. But sometimes, alone in the iron husk of his body, staring into the abyss between stars, he wondered, not as a Sith, not as a slave of destiny, but as the boy who once held a dream in his scarred hands and swore never to let it die. And far away, the child slept, the hum of hyperspace cradling him like a lullaby. The Force coiled around him in silence, patient and inexorable. For in its depths, it knew, cycles do not end, they spiral, and every spiral returns to its beginning. Chapter X, 1-4, the twin suns, return, the desert stretched endless, an ocean of fire frozen in dunes. Twin suns hung like molten coins in a sky scoured white. Heat shimmered, and in that shimmering walked a boy with sand in his boots and stars in his eyes. Luke Skywalker, a name no one whispered yet, a spark buried in dust. He dreamed of speeders that kissed the horizon, of ships that leaped into infinity, of a life that was not this, moisture farms and barren dawns. At night, he stared at the stars until they blurred into tears, never knowing they stared back in the wastes beyond, where the wind carved songs through dead bones. An old man walked. His robes were worn, his saber hidden like a sin. Kenobi watched from shadows, his soul hollow as the dunes. He had burned his brother on a river of fire. He had buried a name in ash. And yet here it was again, not Anakin, but something perilously close. The same hunger in the eyes, the same ache in the blood. He whispered to the silence, "Not this time, please, not this time." But destiny does not plead. It coils, it waits. In the black gulfs between stars, Vader hunted. His fleet strangled systems. His hand crushed empires in miniature. Yet in his dreams, fire bled through steel. A child's laughter tangled with Padme's voice. And far at the edge of thought, a pulse throbbed in the Force, faint but growing. He did not know the name, not yet, but he felt its rhythm, a heartbeat out of time. It gnawed at him, jagged and insistent. Something unfinished, something stolen. He reached for it through the void, and for an instant the suns of Tatooine flickered. As if under shadow, Luke raced his speeder along the spine of a canyon, laughter whipped away by the wind. He did not see the old man on the ridge, watching with eyes like broken glass. Did not feel the currents curling through him, binding, pulling, whispering of sabers and crowns of fire. He was only a boy, but the galaxy was patient, and the Force more patient still. Storms were gathering, storms that would swallow innocence like sand. Night fell in embers. Luke stood beneath a sky blazing with stars, and two suns sank bleeding into the horizon. His breath hitched, something nameless stirring in his bones. Longing, yes, but more than longing. A thread tugged, faint as a sigh. He could not see where it led, but it led away from here, away from the farm, away from the boy he was, toward something vast, terrible, and beautiful. He whispered into the wind, not knowing why. Someday, and far across the void, in a throne room steeped in night, the Emperor smiled, for the game was not over, it had only begun. Chapter 15. The throne of the Sith lightning crowned the stars. The Death Star hung in the void like a wound that refused to close, its metal skin bristling with guns, its core thrumming with death. Inside, in a chamber carved from darkness, three figures stood at the end of all things: the Emperor upon his throne, a son in chains, and a father bound in iron. Luke Skywalker knelt, his saber torn from him, his wrists raw. His breath came hard, but his eyes burned like twin suns, defiant even in shadow. "You'll fail," he said, voice low but steady, like all tyrants. The Emperor's laughter slithered across the chamber, soft as a blade drawn from silk. Fail. His smile was a crescent moon of rot. "My dear boy, I have already won. Your friends will die. Your fleet will burn. And you will kneel at my side, as your father does." Vader stood silent, a tower of black steel, breath rasping like the ocean in a storm. But inside, the armor war raged. Luke's voice was a light spearing the dark, tearing open scars Vader had buried beneath iron. "Father," the word echoed, sharp as a blade, tender as a whisper. He crushed it as he had crushed everything, yet still it bled. The Emperor rose, his robes unfurling like wings of night. "Strike me down," he purred, pressing Luke's saber into the boy's hands. "Do it. Fulfill your destiny. Take your place at my side." Lightning flared beyond the viewport, painting his face in masks of fire. Luke stared, his soul trembling, the weight of vengeance hot in his veins. He saw the fleets burning, his friends dying, his father watching in silence. His saber ignited with a shriek of green fire, and Vader moved. Blades clashed in a storm of emerald and crimson, sparks screaming into the void. Father and son danced on the edge of forever, sabers carving arcs of light across a floor slick with shadows. Luke fought with fury, with fear, with love twisted into fire. Vader met him blow for blow, each strike a hymn to chains and ghosts. "You cannot hide from your destiny," the Sith hissed. Luke's voice broke with rage. "I'll never join you." Their blades locked, spitting sparks like dying stars, faces mirrored in the sheen of steel. One masked, one bare, both drowning. Then Vader spoke, his words a knife of ice. "If you will not turn, perhaps she will. Leia," her name shattered the dam. Luke roared, his saber crashing down in a hurricane of green. Fury became fire, fire became flood. Vader reeled, his blade ripped away, his hands severed in a shower of sparks. He fell to his knees, breath rasping like the death rattle of gods. Luke stood over him, saber raised high, heart pounding with the drumbeat of the dark. One stroke, one choice. The galaxy held its breath, and then the saber fell, not in blood, but in surrender. Luke hurled it aside, his chest heaving. "I am a Jedi," he whispered, voice raw as birth, "like my father before me." Light bloomed in that word, blinding. As dawn, the Emperor's smile curdled into a snarl. "So be it." Jedi lightning tore the sky. It poured from the Emperor's hands in rivers of blue fire, flaying flesh from bone, searing screams from throats. Luke convulsed, his body a pyre of agony. "Father," he cried, the word ripping through the dark like a star collapsing. Vader watched, motionless, the storm painting his armor in scars of light. The voice in his skull hissed chains, hissed silence. But another voice, softer, older, rose like a ghost. "Anakin, help him," Podma's voice, the voice of a woman he killed, yet still loved. The voice of the man he had been. And then he moved, with a roar that shook the bones of the Death Star. Vader seized the Emperor. Lightning screamed, clawing his flesh, rending circuits from his frame. Pain lanced through him, white and pure. But he held on, step by step. Like a man dragging his own corpse, he carried the writhing shadow to the abyss and hurled it into fire. The Emperor's scream split the stars as he fell, his darkness bleeding into eternity. Silence fell. Vader lay broken, armor smoking, breath a ragged whisper. Luke crawled to him, hands trembling, tears cutting tracks through soot. "Father, I won't leave you." The mask turned, lenses cracked, and for the first time in decades, the voice beneath spoke, faint, fragile, human. Luke, fingers, metal and bone, touched his son's face. "You were right. Tell your sister, you were right." The last breath rasped from the iron lungs, a sigh that carried a galaxy. And with it, Anakin Skywalker died. Or, perhaps, at last he was born. Chapter 16. The Tomb of the Chosen. One Ender's sky bled with embers. The forest whispered in tongues older than war, its roots drinking the ash of fallen legions. Among the trees, Ewok drums throbbed like a heartbeat, wild and jubilant. The Empire had cracked. The Death Star lay in shards, its shadow scattered across the void. But on a hill far from the revelry, there was only fire, a single pyre searing. The night with memory. Luke stood alone, the flames painting his face in gold and grief. At his feet, the armor lay heavy as a tomb, black durasteel glistening with the sweat of death. Vader's mask stared back like an empty star, its hollow gaze blind to the forest, blind to victory. But beneath it, not iron, not rage, not shadow. Flesh, scarred, fragile, human. Anakin Skywalker. Returned from the pit too late for life, yet not too late for redemption. The fire rose, devouring the armor, licking the bones of darkness clean. Sparks spiraled upward, tiny suns clawing for the sky, as if the Force itself reached to bear this broken man into its tide. Luke watched, tears carving rivers through soot, his heart a storm of contradictions, love and loss, triumph and ache. He had saved him, and yet not saved him. He had found his father only to lose him in the same breath. Wind sighed through the pines, carrying whispers, not words, not voices, but currents older than flesh. Luke felt them coil around him like unseen. Hands, cool and endless. The Force, no longer a scream, no longer a wound, but something like balance, fragile, flickering, a scale that had tilted and shattered, now struggling to mend. And, in its depths, he felt a presence faint, but bright. Anakin, not as a ghost of rage, not as a mask of iron, but as light unshackled, free dot far beyond, among the shadows of firelight. Other eyes watched Yoda, Obi-Wan, and beside them the man who had burned, whole again, not in flesh, but in spirit. Anakin smiled, not the boy of sons, not the warrior of war, but the father redeemed in the love of a son. Luke's breath hitched, a sob breaking like dawn, and then the vision faded, leaving only flame. The drums swelled, the night trembling with victory. But Luke did not dance. He watched until the last ember died, until darkness swallowed the hill, and even then he lingered, as if the forest might speak. Perhaps it did. Perhaps every rustle of leaf, every flicker of starlight was the galaxy, exhaling, the wound closing, the prophecy sighing its last. Yet deep in the marrow of the Force, something stirred, not hunger, not wrath, but memory. For balance is not peace, it is motion, and motion means change. Luke turned from the pyre, the shadows stretching before him like roads untraveled. The night was calm. To calm, the fire had ended. But the story had not. Chapter 17, the wound in the Force, the Emperor was dead. The Death Star was ash. The galaxy roared with freedom songs, banners rising like dawn across shattered skies. Planets that had cowered beneath iron heels now trembled with hope. The rebellion became a republic again, its leaders drunk on victory, blind to the cracks in their hands. They believed the war was over. They were wrong, for the war had never been of ships and soldiers. It was of shadows, of currents older than suns, and those currents did not calm. They raged unseen, silent, fathomless. The Force was not healed. It was bleeding. On Endor, amid the laughter of Ewoks and the crackle of fire, Luke Skywalker smiled with a grief no one else could taste. He had burned the mask, buried the man, slain the dragon in the heart of the throne, yet the echo did not fade. Darkness clung like frost to the roots of the galaxy. In dreams, Luke felt it coil through the void, cold fingers brushing, soft voices hissing, wounds whispering to wounds. The Emperor had fallen, but the wound he carved was not his alone. It was a hole in the fabric of the Force, a hunger that would not die with him. Balance was a word carved on prophecy, not reality. Luke saw that now. It had not been achieved. It had only shifted, like a tide drawing breath before another storm. In the black gulfs where the Death Star's shards drifted, machines woke. Cloned flesh stirred in vats, bathed in venomous light. Voices like knives murmured of contingency, of legacies chained in blood. Palpatine's shadow stretched, long and unbroken, its tendrils curling into secret stars. The Sith were ashes, but ashes smouldered elsewhere. Another shadow bloomed, not born of hate, but of love twisted into fear. Leia Organa cradled her son beneath a sky of peace, naming him Ben for a ghost who once saved her. His eyes were bright, his laughter pure, but in his veins thrummed the storm, a legacy etched in blood and prophecy. Luke felt it before the boy could speak, a turbulence deep and dark. He swore to guide him, to save him. The vow tasted like iron, and far beyond both, in the labyrinth of the outer rim, a child hid, small, silent, green as moss and old as secrets. Grogu, carried now by mercenary hands, clad in Beskar, his wide eyes watching, unblinking. The galaxy did not know his name. It would, for the Force curled tight around him, possessive, protective, inexorable. He was not destiny, but he was its echo. Stars turned, empires fell, faiths fractured, and through it all the Force whispered its eternal refrain. Not balance, not peace, but choice. Always choice, and choice, when sharpened by fear, becomes a blade. The sky glittered with victory, but in the marrow of creation, the wound pulsed, raw and red, waiting for the next hand to tear it wider. Chapter 18, We Are What They Become. The holocron dimmed. Light retreated into crystal veins, sealing the voice that had carried a galaxy's grief. Dust settled like the last breath of a storm. In the quiet, a figure sat cross-legged in a chamber older than empires, hands trembling over the closed prism. They had heard it all, from the sands of Tatooine to the throne of night, from fire to fire. The rise, the fall, the breaking, the mending. The story of one man, and through him, the story of us all. Anakin Skywalker, slave, pilot, knight, betrayer, savior, the chosen one. They gave him names like chains and crowns, like prayers and curses. They believed prophecy was a map. They were wrong. Prophecy was a mirror, and when he shattered, so did those who gazed into it. For the truth is this: there was never balance, only motion. Jedi, Sith, Empire, Republic, flames devouring flames, each wore a circle carved in blood. They said he brought balance. Perhaps he did for a moment, a breath, before the scales cracked again. And now the wound yawns wide once more, hungry for the choices of children not yet born. On a desert world, two suns still rise over bones of sand. A farm boy once stared at them and dreamed, as another boy did before him. Far away, a scavenger will do the same. And beyond them, in the labyrinth of the void, a child cradled in steel walks a path older than memory. Threads tangle, names change, faces fade, but the pattern endures. For we are what they become, and they, Jedi, Mandalorian, Sith, slave, savior, are what we are willing to make of them. Every choice an echo, every echo a storm. Perhaps that is the curse of the Force, or perhaps its gift that nothing ends. that every ending is only a door. The holocron was lifted, its weight like a heart in the hand. Outside, the stars burned, patient and pitiless. A voice old as dust, soft as wind, whispered from nowhere and everywhere at once. Balance was never peace. It was choice, and choice must be made again. The prism flickered once, then darkness, and the story waited to be told again.